cloud. Hey everybody, it's Scott and Rita again. We're back on Zoom, so just a fun little thing. Decided to try that again, save a little money, reorganize. But everyone knows Zoom, so why not? Today we're going to talk about a podcast. Because we're thinking of starting a podcast, and so we want to do a Cosmic Dialog in the future. A year ago, we started a podcast, and what happened about that. So we have no idea, again, what's going to come up and what we are going to say. We have some certain ideas about our podcast. Maybe we'll come through with that. But yeah, we have no idea what we're going to say. So Rita, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll start if you want.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. All right, so it's summer 2021, and Scott and I started a podcast a year ago, and we just decided to, as we do most things, just do it without much of a plan. And it's really evolved into a multifaceted thing. We just, whenever we're inspired, we create something that goes on the podcast. And it's taken many forms. Can be channeling, it can be poetry, and Scott sings, it can be music behind the words, it can be something written. So it's it's a little bit more of a performance venue in a way, which I didn't really expect when we were talking about it initially. And then it's turned into this really powerful thing of, well, when we started it, we wanted to be very aware of whatever we said, because we went into it with the intention of whatever we were going to be talking about is something that was going to be created in one way or another. So we started to be just really aware of our words, because we were sure that we were going to see it show up in the physical world one way or another, or in ourselves, in our bodies, and somebody else around us. So we wanted to, it became a really incredibly healing and expansive practice to be so aware of what you're saying, because you know it's going to happen. So what was your experience just jumping into that? It's kind of a lot of responsibility,
yeah. But it was a lot of responsibility. And one of the things that I noticed that you know, in our awareness of really wanting to be aware of everything that we were saying, that inevitably there would be times where things would just come right out. Like there, you know, we would be, I know, we would be like speaking, and we would be very intentional, knowing the responsibility that whatever we were saying was probably going to manifest in the world, where we're going to see other people kind of in our circle of intuitive psychics, healers, start speaking these things too, start saying these things, whether or not they had seen our podcast or not, or listened to or not. But then every once in a while over the last year, we've had these little moments where Rita will say something and she'll just be stunned. I will say something and I will just be stunned, as far as like, when and where and how did that come through me to be put onto this medium so that it could be spoken into being. So that was the working title of our podcast, Speaking into Being. And so that was a that's a phenomenon now that we almost look for it. We almost wait for it to happen, because largely we're playing with this idea of invisibility. We have always felt like, culturally and in the world and in society, we've felt invisible or marginalized or put to the very borders of what people think is acceptable. And so we played with that invisibility idea and became invisible in this audio podcast. And then we speak intentionally. But yeah, I think that inevitably there were just times where some real interesting things just came right out, and as if like there was just a force that kind of was just waiting to go through you, waiting to go through the neurons in your mind out your mouth without even you even having any control whatsoever. Did you find anything like that too? What were your feelings? I know that you said some things like that too.
Yeah. Well, it started happening before the podcast. So we figured we might as well put this out to the world on a little bit of a larger scale. Even if nobody actually hears it, at least it's not just a one-time spoken thing, but it's now out in the technology of the planet to be accessed by whomever wants to hear it. But that also made me realize that even the one-time spoken thing is in the technology of the planet. It's just not the electronics or the human-made technology. But I've said it, therefore it is. It carries onward on whatever science I don't know about yet. So then it just became really natural for us. Once that really sunk in, that, well, it's like we're on a 24/7 podcast. And we always have been. We just didn't know it. And that was also at the time that the old ways had already fallen apart, and we were, as a species, we had not figured that out yet. But you and I were pretty aware of that, and so it's like this came right as the world systems were gone, and almost like this is the new system.
Yeah, it was. The more we would speak about these things, the more we kind of realized that there was this paradox of, oh, well, these things have always been in the world and in the technology, and then certain things we felt like, were they part of the technology or not, or are we speaking them into being for the first time? So we couldn't necessarily, we have no way of knowing either one, so we just kind of like walk in the middle of it all. So it wasn't, oh, well, we knew this all was happening anyway. No, it wasn't that at all. I mean, when all the systems were breaking down, you just have to sort of be in the middle and watch and listen, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or listen and be, or it is that paradox, I think, was really a driving curiosity for me. It wasn't about, what am I going to speak into being today? What am I going to come up with, and what am I going to like say? It was about,
what am I going to manifest today?
Yeah, it wasn't about that at all. It wasn't, it was more of like, I just want to talk about what I'm feeling right now and what's, coming through a little bit, and then just let that force to sort of take over. And
Mm-hmm.
whatever is, and then we kind of realized, whoa, where did that come from? What did we just discover? Or was it already discovered and we just sort of put it onto this plane? Kind of like, was it just here underneath our reality and we just were able to kind of let it come across? Like, it was like that. Like, we couldn't determine one or the other. Was it already here? Maybe. Did we just speak it to be here? Maybe. And in all that time, we were just, we listened to their podcast and we're like, who are these invisible people telling these things just out of this audio ether? It was very different experience too, of just hearing it, hearing the pauses. Because when we recognize that, if we, sometimes we would record these things on video and you couldn't see our facial expressions when we just put it on the audio, but you could hear the pauses. And that experience was very different, of just hearing the pause, hearing the waiting, not knowing the anxiety of somebody else. It was really just, what did I just say? Internal thinking, because we can see that on video. But without seeing that in an audio format, those pauses gave, at least me listening, I felt like, that was that really me? Was that really Rita behind there? And then there's this pause, and then I feel like the pauses when we listened gave rise to some other things that you and I would talk about in our weekly meetings. So
and then we would hear from people and they would hear something that we didn't even say. It's like a whole new podcast happened in those pauses.
hey, I'm smiling and laughing about that too, because I'm honored to hear that. Actually, I love that, because to me that just shows that, okay, good, that you're letting us get out of the way. Yeah, Scott and Rita are talking, but that's so cool that you let Scott and Rita be so out of the way that you listen to the pauses.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't think that. Most people would like say, oh, well, thank you for listening to what I had to say. I hope it inspired you, and I hope that it helped you somehow. And we're like, wow, I'm really glad that you kind of listened to us when both of us were out of the way and it was silent in those pauses, and this is what came through to you.
It was like everybody listening had their own podcast.
And early on, I don't know if we were really aware of that. Even when we were like, let's do a podcast, we were just kind of like wanting to experiment. And that, you and I kind of always do these counter practice things. We've always done, when the world goes one way, run the other way. When the podcasts out there are like all about self-aggrandizement and making sales and promoting and inspiring, you and I just got into being invisible and letting the quiet carry people. And that's, I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm in a really fun little spot when I even talk about that. It excites me. Because a lot of the other stuff out there is just not, it's the same formulaic thing. And here we are. Listen to Rita and Scott get out of the way, become invisible, and have pauses in silence, and maybe you'll hear something in that silence.
Welcome to our podcast.
Welcome to our world. So I kind of like that. And so without like having to like just expect those things to happen. We just kind of approach things like as a curiosity, and whenever we think of a topic for the week, we just sort of come up with something. And I like that. It's pretty free form. Sometimes we're pretty much psychically connected with what we say. I like the one where I kind of like broke apart what you spoke and I broke apart what I spoke. We had a topic and I broke these things apart. You got like a paragraph, and then I got a paragraph from what I said, and then you got a paragraph and I got a paragraph. And so ironically and crazily, it fits perfectly.
I love that. I love it.
And I didn't have to like have, here's Rita's section, chunk, on a pause, and here's Scott's section, chunk. But we just intermingled. And that was kind of fun. And I want to do more of that. So just playing with the technical things and yeah, and without really even forcing, it was just play. So, and then just to listen to the pauses and listen to, wow, did I say that? And then Rita said that, and then you have some sort of interesting new, I don't want to say understandings or new questions in those gaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just became this whole big platform of experimentation.
Yeah. And of course, it's always hard for us to describe what we do to other people. It's just, it's just the nature of things,
Mm-hmm. We just do what we do.
We do what we do. Tell me about your podcast. Oh, well.
I'd love to.
However, if you just listen, that might be a little better way of knowing what our podcast is about. Or just to say we go counter to everything, and we're invisible, and we make things visible, I guess. We don't make them, they just appear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're invisible to make room for all the other visible things.
And just also like be in that space. So many folks are so afraid of those dark tunnels of invisibility. It creeps them out. It makes them feel scared and well, if I become invisible and I'm not showing myself, and I'm not being in this way of putting myself out here, how will I ever like achieve or accomplish this or earn this or become this? And it's all this like forward momentum, outward becoming, achieving, increasing income, and
it puts you in a codependent relationship with whoever is or isn't your audience. We sort of realized that early on that we were like being in a new way outside of codependency, and how freeing that is. Oof.
Yeah, we didn't have to look at all the studies and market research about how to gain listeners or how to do all this. We didn't even have to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no model for us, and, which is really freeing, really a relief. And yeah, like you said, codependency is the exact term to use about that. It's people get into these podcasts because they have this idea they lack something, or they're supposed to do this in order to increase their likability or their search engine scores or all of that. And we're like, no, we're just going to speak things out of the invisible to see what happens. And our audience is really just the consciousness of the world, the universe, that consciousness that's peeking through to us every time, all the time, whether we see it or whether we don't see it, hear it, don't hear it. That's what we speak to. And that's what we hope people pick up a little bit.
And just think about the listener end of codependency with this whole platform of YouTube or podcasts, that kind of addictive thing it gets into, where they might want somebody to tell them what to do next, or what's going on in the world, or give me this feeling that I get when I listen to you. And you couldn't have that with us because you never knew what we were going to be talking about or not talking about.
I remember our first comment that was like, I don't even get your podcast. What's this all about? I don't get it. I don't get it. But I'm going to listen again. We'll see what this is all about. And it was kind of funny. But at the same time, you have to kind of accept it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of grace and and that person became one of our most avid listeners after they just decided, whoa, this hit me. I can kind of see where you're coming from, and it hit me like a wall collapsing against me. So we actually felt like that was a big compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, your whole world slipped from under your feet. We felt like that was a compliment.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't feel that.
Yeah, they try to correct your perception of what happened to you.
Yeah. And just allowing somebody just to kind of navigate themselves through all of it. And we're just navigating ourselves through all of it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a little bit of a happiness in me that this is a very unique space.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really grateful for the things that come through with it. I'm really grateful that we both can be totally as far as we want outside of the boundaries.
Yeah.
And really and now I'm kind of like wondering like what kind of boundaries are there really?
Yeah, right.
So, and now we both just like, I barely watch television or barely watch the news. I barely watch this, and things just come through and fly through, and people tell me that was exactly what they needed to hear for the time. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on really.
Right.
But that's good.
And then it extended beyond the podcast for us, of really being aware of what we said and what we didn't say at any particular time. And it really just became a natural thing to be aware of the technology that's always been here.
I remember a time when I was like walking around, and unexpectedly I realized, oh my gosh, this is a moment where I feel invisible. I didn't have to force it. It just sort of happened. And I was like, oh, wow, this is where I feel invisible. And I started to kind of embrace, there's a different word than power. It's not necessarily power, but the real, it's like power. The real presence that you can get with that, you almost feel like, thank goodness, oh wow, I'm in this spot where I am invisible in this world right now. And I just felt I always felt like a gift at that moment. Whereas most people would feel scared or shy or frightened or anxiety coming up. Once I realized, oh, I can just sort of sit here until I'm no longer invisible. Let's see how long that takes.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the pauses that we usually do. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. And then in that space, we started just feeling, oh, I'd like to create something right now.
Yeah.
What is it? Or it's switched to what wants to be created right now. I'd like to let it be created.
And that's when you start feeling that real gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
That, for me, it was like, whoa, now I have this opportunity to be this vessel that could help create something that wants to come through.
Yeah. And then we started to feel just how much wants to come through. It wants to be created. And it's just, wow. It's amazing that we refused for so long. Centuries.
Yeah. And just through that experiment, I remember one time when I like just felt that invisibility, and then that came through, some things came through, and then I felt like I spoke, I don't even know what I said, but I spoke something through in this group, and everybody got quiet. It was so brief, and I don't even remember what I said, but it just diffused a lot of people around me for a moment.
Yeah.
And then they went back to their regularly scheduled stuff, but and I don't even know if a lot of them remember it, but yeah, that's why I think you can almost think that there's like, you feel a little bit more of a power, but it's not really power. It's just, you become this like,
Naturalness.
yeah, naturalness. And those little moments where like you can bring something through, like, or when something just comes through that wasn't in the consciousness quite yet. And then it kind of, you can peek it's like a bird peeking its nose through the birdhouse. And sometimes it's picked up, and sometimes it's left alone, and sometimes it's like, oh, I really saw that. And yet not internalized, and some people just take it in. And yeah, it became a lot of things for a lot of people, which I hope continues.
Yeah, whether we know about them or not.
Yeah, and that's our big challenge or task, I think, is to constantly remind ourselves that we're still in various grades of invisibility, that we are constantly putting ourselves out of the way into a space that's more pliable, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's a little more pliable. in that invisibility.
Do more things in that
Oh,
realm. There's more senses, there's more abilities. It's like we step into our spirit bodies during that time, and just doing the podcast helped us to know how to do that whenever we wanted to.
there's another marketing play. Why start a podcast? It's to get in touch with your spirit, your own internal spirit, and not your physical body.
Yeah, which happens to nourish your physical body when you do.
Anything else you want to say about it?
I want to emphasize that paradox of when you step into your spirit body, it's not a leaving behind your physical body. It's loving your physical body even more. When you connect, when you're able to be in both. It's not an escape by any means. It's a more of a fullness.
I've always used the little saying that Tom Cowan, Celtic scholar, says that the soul is not in the body is in the soul. And so to really be more in touch with your body is to actually feel that expanse around the body. Everything that you see is part of your soul. So to connect with it all, your body is just a part. That's what helps me. But yeah, it's being in the soul where you're not hitting up against a wall or this physical matter of a floor and walls and, you know, glass panes and rocks at your feet. And those things become part of the soul. It all becomes a connectedness you have in this out of the body, that the body's within kind of experience, which is still a paradox.
Yeah.
We can rest in paradox. There we go.
We always get there. Good. I like it.
I do too. So we'll keep creating. Thank you, Rita.
Okay. Thank you.